Hello, friends, and welcome to lesson 7 of Unit 4, which would be the last lesson. And this is on infrastructure financing. So far, we have discussed unemployment and government policies, policy implications and employment trends, development strategies and agriculture sector, Indian foreign trade, energy, transport, education, and health, which are the sectors which we call as social infrastructure. Then in the last lesson, we discussed about gender issues and social inclusion. And today we are going to talk about infrastructure financing. So we'll look at what is infrastructure financing, what are the issues, what are the sources for infrastructure finance. Bank credit is one of them. We'll look at some of the stats and who are the key players, especially from the private sector. So when we talk about infrastructure financing, as you know that you need a good infrastructure for your country, which we discussed in detail in the last lesson. Now, who is going to finance? So huge funds are required for these huge infrastructure projects. We talked about social infrastructure, which includes your transportation, energy, communication, and agriculture sector. So the biggest issue is how to finance these projects. Now, when we look at this diagram, this explains that the government has to either take loan from the lender or use the taxpayers' money to fund these projects. For example, there is a project which has to be in the public domain, a treatment plant. So the sovereign guarantee loan is taken from the lender by the government, and then this construction contract is given to a private construction contractor who is responsible for the construction of the treatment plant. Once it is there, then it is treating the water and then supplying to the users who pay the bills or the tariff on the usage of that water. So that is again used for funding of such projects. So this is the cycle which is used. So this lender will see who all can lend the money to the government. Now, very recently, because we have one limited company which is known as IIFCL, which is India Infrastructure Finance Company Limited, which is able to get the money from the lenders and work on behalf of the government for the execution of these projects in terms of financing. So on 11th December 2019, there were few cabinet decisions which were taken. So number one is so equity support of around 5,300 crores for the financial year 2019-20, and 10,000 crore equity support has been given to this company, limited company, for 2020-21. The capital has been increased from 6,000 to 25,000 crore, and also it has enabled the company to create the headroom for borrowing, so they can borrow on behalf of the government for these infrastructure projects. So these were some landmark decisions taken by the cabinet in 2019. So what are the issues for infrastructure finance? As you know, all political leaders, all political parties talk to the public during the elections and even later that will provide bijli, pani and sadak, because these are the basic infrastructure requirements. But generally, the major issue which the infrastructure projects foresee is that, for example, if we quote some stats, around 27% of 1,500 infrastructure projects which are executed by the central government are running behind schedule. So as a result, there is always a 20% cost overrun. So it is not only you are financing the projects, you are also have to borrow money because the projects are never completed on time. Now, as per three different sources, like CRISIL is one, similarly, the Global Infrastructure Outlook by the Economic Survey 1718 is another source, and then Asian Development Bank. So, they have given their projections for the infrastructure spending finance which is required for India. So, the annual average finance is to the tune of from 150 to 300 billion per annum. Now, how to mobilize this whopping amount for the infrastructure projects? So, the government has adopted this route of 48% through uh, private public partnership and 52% through the budgetary expenditure. They allocate the budget for these projects. From the 12th plan onwards, it has been decided to spend around 8.25% of GDP, where the target is almost more than 1,000 billion US dollars. So let us look at that what has been the spending or the financing as percentage of GDP so far. If you look at the total investment for these infrastructure projects since 2007, it has been going following upward trend till 2011-12. So where from 6.4 to 8.4% it has gone up. If you look at the private participation, it is from 2.2 to 2.9% of the GDP, whereas the public investment has been from 4.2 to 5. Then it has seen a downward trend, and still we have not been able to reach the figures of 2011-12. So in 2016-17 it was 6.1, and wherein the private investment has been 2.1%. So we want to take it to 8.26% of GDP. So let's hope we are able to achieve that. What are the different sources of infrastructure financing? So one thing keep in mind is that in India there is 100% foreign direct investment which has been allowed through the automatic route. So far the journey has been through the public funds only. But this infra financing can be either from the government sector or from the private sector. So the government one is through the budgetary support, allocation in the budget, and second what we looked at as the limited company IIFL who is trying to raise money through the lenders. The other way is the private sector that we talked about, that public-private partnership. So financial institutions and banks in the public private domain, they lend the money for infrastructure financing. Similarly, the capital markets, but these are only for the better rated operational projects because they are looking at return. Let us look at the bank credit through infrastructure. And when you look at that, because the banks play very important role for the infrastructure building of the country. And also when the projects are completed, they also become alternate source of funding for these infrastructure, provided they are completed on time only, then they will. We talked about the example of treatment plants. So once it is ready, only then the water supply can be given to the users who then pay for the usage of that water. So the more it gets delayed, the more funds are required in order to complete, and so is the delay in gathering that alternate funding. So when we look at the bank credit to infrastructure, let us look on the left hand side, the yellow bars that you are seeing. So that is the total bank credit irrespective of to infrastructure. So total credit which have been provided by the banks. So if you look at from 2011 to 2017, so in 2011 it has been 35 lakh crores, and it has been raised to a level of almost 70 lakh crores. So from 35 to 70, almost double in 2017. Whereas when you look at the percentage share of infrastructure credit from the bank, from the total bank credit, which is with the line on top, is just was 14.2% in 2011, and it has gone down to 12.7%. Although maybe the amount is more, but the percentage of the bank credit going to infrastructure has gone down from 14.2 to 12.7. And as per the latest RBI report of March 2020, the maximum bank credit has gone to the power sector, which is around 53%. So, what are the future infrastructure investments if we look at India from financial year 18 to 2022? So, there is a big investment over this period on power, around 14.5 lakh crores. On roads is 10 lakh crores, then railways, then airports and ports, urban development, and then others. Almost around 50 lakh crores over the 4 year period. Who are the key players for infrastructure financing in India? So, if we talk of the private sector, two big players are Adani and Bharti. And you might be looking at Adani, which is really doing well in the last 1 decade. They're into power, green energy, ports, aviation. So we start with public sector banks. So then you have the public sector, private sector banks, and non-banking financial corporations. So then they are over there. Then there are financial institutions who are financing the infrastructure in India. Then you have the funds which are coming either through FDI route or through the private sector, the companies from abroad. And then comes your corporates, and we talked about Tata Power is big, Bharti, Adani, IRP. So these are some of the key players for financing the infrastructure in India. Now, when you look at the global level, so which are the global infrastructure markets? So the largest infrastructure market in terms of percentage of global spending is China, 38%. Then comes your North America, around 21%. Then Western Europe is 17%, and then rest of the world is 24%. So look at China and North America, which is almost taking around 60%. So when you look at the fastest growing infrastructure markets, so India is number one. So more than 10% growth there. And then China is around 7%, and then North America 3%. So in terms of the gap, that is what is required and what has been spent on infrastructure. So if you look at the figures from 2010 to 2015, so India, this this is spending is around 5.6 percent of your GDP. China at 8.3%, huge. But when you look at the gap from 2017 to 2035, so India has a gap of 0.7, whereas if you look at China, they are overspending, so 2.5. So they are really investing in the infrastructure. So similarly, other countries, but for India, it is 0.7% gap. So if we want to take some examples where big private finance has come in the domestic market, so this is like in Japan, Indonesia, Taiwan, and these are specific projects which have been listed here: Nigeria, then Qatar, then Saudi Arabia, and then the New Zealand. So that is all from my side, and let me summarize this lesson for you. We discussed what is infrastructure financing, then we talked about the issues which we face in financing of the infrastructure, what are the sources for infrastructure financing, and the bank credit, and what percentage goes to the infrastructure, and who are the key players. So friends, here is a small quiz, and please write down your answers. So question number one is, how much FDI is allowed for infrastructure financing, foreign direct investment, which is allowed? Which infrastructure has been allocated the maximum bank credit as per Reserve Bank of India March 2020 report? And question number three is, which is the largest infra market as per global spending in the world? So you can check your answers. 100% FDI is allowed for infra financing. Power sector has been allocated the maximum bank credit as per RBI report. China is the largest infra market as per the global spending. So thank you very much for being such a good audience. And with this, we finish our Unit 4 with Lesson 7. And if you want to go into some further reading for this lesson on infrastructure financing, this is a good article from IIM Ahmedabad, which is worth reading. So thank you very much. Bye for now. Shabba Khair.